Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this fabulous tech talk by Mr. Dmitri Gaskin, a 12-year-old Drupal core developer. With Dmitri's permission, I'm going to pontificate a little bit about how I actually met Dmitri. So I am a program manager for the open source team, and we run various initiatives to help get students involved in open source software development. And we thought, you know, we do this great program called Summer of Code, which focuses on university students, but why don't we try to do something that would be interesting for secondary schoolers, right, pre-university students? And we did a very small pilot, and one of the projects that we worked with was Drupal, which is a content management system. And you know, they came to me and they said, you know, we've got this really smart kid who'd love to be a part of the highly open participation contest, but he's sort of too young. He's 12 and the age cutoff is 13. Is there any way we can make an exception? And I went to our lawyers, because our lawyers are really cool, and I said, so can we make an exception? And they went, no. This is one of those times when we can't be cool. So we went, all right, what a bummer. And then all of a sudden I heard, well, that's okay. Dmitri's cool with it. He's just going to mentor other students until he's old enough to actually participate. So without further ado, I'm going to leave you in the hands of this gentleman, Mr. Dmitri Gaskin, who's going to tell you about jQuery. Dmitri?
Thanks. So, first of all, I would like to thank Leslie for introducing me. I would like to thank all of you for being here. And I'd like to thank Leslie for inviting me. So, now I'm going to talk about jQuery. And jQuery's motto is the write less, do more JavaScript library. So, now a little bit about me. So, I am 12 years old, as Leslie said. I'm very involved in the Drupal project. Drupal is a content management system, but it's also a content management framework. So we focus on being really extendable, and I would recommend checking it out. It's really neat. Unfortunately, that's not what I'm here to talk about. So, now a little bit about you. How many of you know and can write JavaScript? That's most of you. Okay, very good. So I will skip my part about what JavaScript is. So pardon me, I'm just going to flip through a lot of slides. This is the agenda for if we were to go over the JavaScript basics, but we're not going to. Yeah, that's how you deal with arrays. You probably know that already. That's how you deal with objects. So, yeah. Then there's the demo. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. So first I will talk about jQuery basics and just the basic use of jQuery. Then I'll talk about plugins and advanced jQuery. I figure I'll bunch those two together because advanced jQuery is fairly short. So the basic function is the $. Now, there are three ways you use this. You can use it with the CSS selector, any CSS3 pseudo selector, anything like that. You can put some HTML in it. I'm not really going to go over, because of how much time we have, I'm not going to go over how we use that. Or you can use it with the DOM element. That's fairly simple. So let me just show off basic use of that. So here I have my list of organizations that are involved in Summer of Code this year. So let me use a CSS selector. This is a table, by the way, if it doesn't look too clear. There's my little JavaScript console, and that's where I'm going to be typing the JavaScript. So inside the $. Function, I can pass it a parameter of a CSS selector. Let's just take table. Whoops. It would help if I could type. So it gave me an array with a table, and I just built this little cool thing that if you mouse over this, then it should highlight. You can't really see that color, can you? But it highlights, if you would see, it would highlight the whole table here. Then we could, for example, let's take a table row. And this has all the table rows, and as I mouse over them, it'll go over the next one. Then I can take, let me just clear the screen. I could take all the data, every single cell. That takes a while because there are obviously a lot of those. But then like that. Whoops. Yeah. So you can use classes, CSS like that. Now you can also use like classes and IDs and stuff like that. So let's say I have a class which is project, I think it's project name. yeah, so all these, only the first table row, the ones in this column have the class project name. And then I could do project, project ideas. And that's everything in the second row. For some reason, Audacity is selected, but everything in this row where it says ideas, so in that column, sorry, not row. So then I could also do it by ID. So let's see, my favorite, Drupal. Drupal has its ID, Drupal. Yeah. Whoops. Okay, that was not intended. So, no, you're not going to be able to see Drupal. Let's do something like the Apache, I think it's Apache Software Foundation. So that's this row. That one right there, because I gave the whole row the ID ASF. So yeah, those are some basic CSS selectors. You can use CSS3 pseudo selectors. I'll cover that a bit later. So back to the presentation. So I guess I better cover those pretty soon. So you can also do actions. So when you select something, you can do an action on everything you selected. So here's some basic actions. The first set of basic actions I'll talk about is traversal, so how you traverse the DOM. So you can use children, which gets the children by, and then an expression. So this is, you get all the children, and you filter them out, so you only have the ones that match this certain CSS expression. Parent, this gets the parent, quite obviously. Parent's expression. And so now I should note, for all of these, if you have, for example, say I selected all the table rows. Now, this didn't only select one thing. So doing .parent will go through each one of them and get the parent of that one and make it the new selection. So now we have a new selection, which is all the parents of all the table rows. And this happens to be just one thing, which would be the tbody tag. So you parents and then with the expression, that means you find all the parents that match a certain expression. So I could do .parents and pass in table, and that would find all parents that are a table, and there's obviously only one of those. So, at least in my case. There's also .find expression. This is pretty much the same as .children expression. .filter, this filters out everything from the current selection, only the ones that match the expression. So, say I have, I selected all the table of the the table cells, and then I could filter with the class project ideas, and this would then give me only the project idea cells. Filter function. So what this does, you can pass in actually a function, and you call this. You can use this, and that is just one of them, and so it iterates through that function for each one of the selected elements, and then if that function returns true, then that element is in the new selection. If it returns false, it's not. .eq index, that just gets the element of position index in the current selection. So say I have selected 3 table rows, and I want to get the second one, then I just pass in 2. .not expression, get everything that does not match this expression. So if I, again, if I selected all the TD cells, and I did .not and then .project ideas, what that would do is it would get all the ones that are not project ideas. It would get all the project names. .add expression. What this does is it adds everything that matches to this that matches the expression, everything, not just ones that have to do with the current selector to the current selection. Next. So say you have the table row, and that has the ID Drupal. If you do .next, then it gets the next table row. .next, all the ones after the current one. .prev, the previous one. .prev, all the previous ones. .slice, that just like slices. So start and end. Pretty self-explanatory. .siblings, this is basically like .next all and .prev all in one. So then there are also some pretty special ones. .end. So what I call all these traversal things destructive operations, because they destroy the current selection and they change it. So, but you can use .end to end the current, well, you can use that to go back to the last one. So say you did all table cells, and then you filtered by project ideas, and then you can do .end on that to go back to all the table cells. And so you could call any of these traversal ones any number of times and do .end always to reverse to the last one. And there's .and self, and this just selects the current one and the previous one. So let me show those off. So let's say, let me take the first one, adium. I'll call adium.next. And this gets the Apache Software Foundation. And if you can't see that what I'm highlighting this one. Let me reload the page and see if Audacity is still selected. There we go. So then there's, let's get children. So let's do adium.children. And this just gets all the children. And there are exactly 2 elements. If you cannot see, then there's this one, adium. That's the project name. That's the first TD. And then there's the ideas, which is the second one. Then we could do, for example, let's get let's do .preval. So let's see. So this gets all the ones before that one. So we could look at it, and this is the first one, second one. If you can't see, I just ran my mouse through everything from here to here. Let's clear that. Is this making sense? Okay, I'm glad. Okay, next, manipulation. This is actually doing stuff with the things you selected. So for example, say you selected a table data, and you want, so currently I have it like an href is something, like code.google.com/whatever, a link to the organization. Say I wanted to change it to, I don't know, like foo. So I can do .html val, and I can pass any HTML in this, and it will go in unescaped. Now .text is the equivalent, but with escaping, so they do exactly the same thing, except .text escapes the HTML. .append content, this just appends stuff to the end. By the way, these operations, they do it on everything you selected. So say you selected 5 table rows, then if you .append content, then it'll add content to the end of each one of them. .append to. So what this does is it takes all of them and it appends them to a certain other object. So say I want to append the text ideas and that link from one project to another project's ideas link. I have no idea why I would do this, but I can. You can also append it to a jQuery object. So you could append it and inside that put like a jQuery selector with some traversal stuff. .prepend content, pretty much self-explanatory. This one too, it does the same thing as append and append to. Yeah. So .after content. This, so say I have a table. I have the table selected, and then I do .after. This will put it actually after the table tag instead of at the bottom of the table tag, right before the closing one. .before, same thing. Wrap. This wraps it with some HTML, and it'll automatically find the innermost area. So, for example, if I have a div and inside that I have a span, and inside that I have a bold, then it'll wrap. But then it'll split it. So div, span, bold. Put the content here, and then the end bold, end span, and div. .empty, this just empties it. .remove, this removes the elements from the DOM completely. .remove expression, this only removes ones that match the expression. I have a feeling this is deprecated because you could just use like .find or .filter with the expression and then .remove that. So let me show those off. Let's see, so I'll use .html. So I'll take Drupal and I'll put in .html. Drupal is so we go to Drupal. Drupal is awesome. So now let's reload the page so that you can see. Let's use .text, and let's do .text with the exact same thing. Actually, I don't think this just removes the HTML. It doesn't escape it. But let's test that out. Because Drupal really is awesome. No, it doesn't. It escapes it. So there's that. Let's use some of the more complicated ones. Let's use adium dot. Let's just remove that table row, and it's gone. Let's do west-north dot empty, and it's still there. It's just that there's nothing in it. Let's do like I don't know. Maybe that's enough for a demo. What? Yeah, it removes the children and the children text nodes. Maybe we really should get to selectors. So selectors. You can use #ID, #class, element type, for example, table, table row. This is just in case you're not up to your CSS3. Last, that first removes gets the first. So if you do table row dot first colon first, that gets the first table row. Same with last. Not, you can put another CSS expression nested inside of there. Parent child, where child is a direct child of the parent, not a distant child. Even, odd, contains stuff that's empty, hidden, visible. And then there's the attribute. An attribute is value. An attribute is not value. Sorry. Let me show that off. So let me get the first table row. So this gets the first table row. Let's get t-body. So you can also combine these. So the first table row, the t-body, and this one. And then we can do all kinds of things like that. I hope you know you're up to your CSS3, because CSS3 is becoming more and more prominent. So that's done. Now I'll talk about how to get attributes in CSS. So there's .attr that just sets the attribute, the HTML attribute, name to value, name and function and whatever this function returns. And then there's like you can use an object. So say if you want to set multiple attributes, because really jQuery focuses not only on writing less code and doing more, but also on being a lot faster. So with something like this, you don't need to call the .attr function many times. You can call it once with just an object. You can remove an attribute. So you can set the value on like an input element. You can do CSS. You can set the element of name to value. And again, you can do it with an object of properties. You can add the class, remove a class. And now I'll show that. I'll do this. Let's see. No, I'll do .css background color. So you can either do it like the CSS attributes like that, or like this, like camel case if you're doing it with an object, because then you can't really have a dash unless you have it quoted, and that just gets all complex. Really pretty color. Very beautiful. So that just shows how to do that. If we had an input element, I would show you how to set the value. It's really simple. You just call .val. OK, so there are a couple of more that I could show off if you really wanted me to, but I don't think they're. What? Show off. OK. Let's see. Let's do CSS with an object. Apache Software Foundation.css, and let's say background color is green, and color, so the text color will be orange. Well, it would be orange, but I have some A elements, the anchor elements, so that doesn't really work. Actually, it looks a lot better than on there than it does on my screen because you can't really see the difference between the text and the background. But okay. So we could add a class if I had classes defined. I don't really define very many classes. So here's just a few more really useful functions. Now, all of these return something that's not just a jQuery thing. So this returns the HTML in the current selection text, the value if you have input elements, the attribute of name, the CSS of name, the height of the current element, the width. If it returns true if the elements match the expression. Otherwise, it returns false. If it has the class and the browser offset. So like top and left. Let me show that off. So let's get the browser offset of Audacity. So this is an object. It'll just say object, object. So let's get the left offset. And so it's 270 pixels. That probably looks a lot more up there, but I have it enlarged. Offset top. So that's the offset function. Then I could do BBC, not BBB, dot HTML, and it shows the A links. Let's use dot text so we can see the escaped HTML. Oh, I guess here it doesn't escape it. It just removes the HTML. Inconsistency. I'll file a bug when I get home. So let me talk about a new thing. Now this does not. This is more complicated. So this is how you really get your code fast, and you also get your code smaller, and it looks pretty, and because it's readable and it's fun. So you can attach multiple functions to a single selector. So you can do .css selector .action1 .action2, and I'll talk about why that works later, soon. So the action. So say you select like the table cell and .action1, we could do .html something. .action2 is we could do like .css and set like the background color to be purple. And then we could do as many of those as we want. So let me show that off. So let me take west north. West north dot. Let's set it the HTML. No, that won't work because that'll not validate. So .west north. Let me show off these selector powers. TD first. So get the first table cell in the west north table row. Oh, what the heck? Let's just put a little TR there. Okay, so now let's set the HTML to, let's see, what's World of Warcraft, a game that doesn't really rival this, but it's still a game, so somewhat rivals. I know if you wanted like a real website, you probably wouldn't want to set the background color to be purple, but who cares? Yeah, so we did two things. We changed the text, and we set the background color to purple. In case you can't notice this big purple block, here it is. You could do as many of those as you want, and any of the functions that I just covered. I know it's probably hard to remember all of them. I wouldn't blame you for not remembering a single one. Okay, so now bindings. Binding is the jQuery way of responding to user interaction. So with DOM, the classic thing, you could do like a document.getElement by ID, and then you could set .onClick equals function. But what if you want to bind? What if you want to make multiple functions for when you click? Well, jQuery can solve that. It can solve it even better if I have water. So the basic function you use is a CSS selector .bind. So you could bind it to a click. And everything that happens inside that function, right there, that happens when the user clicks. .css selector, and you can do pretty much any event. Now, I'll run through a really quick list. There are tons and tons of them, and I'll tell you where you can get a list of them in our resources section, which is at the very end. So here are some events. Click, mouse over, mouse out, mouse enter when you first. So this is, I think, a jQuery specific event when there are a couple of those. So what you can do, like td.mouse enter, this background color is purple, and then mouse out, this background color is white. And so that's just the first time that you enter it. Yeah, mouse leave. Blur for just input elements. Change, again, for input elements. Double click. Focus. Key down, key up, key press, scroll, resize, load. And that's, for example, if you're used to setting with old style JavaScript, for the body, onload is something. That's exactly this. Unfortunately, when that happens, that's right when the page loads and the JavaScript executes. Sometimes the CSS files haven't loaded. A lot of times the images you have and you haven't loaded. And so jQuery has a specific function to solve that, which is the ready event. And so this is just like the load event, except it's when it's after all the images and CSS and everything like that have been loaded. So let me show the events off. So let me use that example I used before. So td first dot bind mouse enter function, and again the bind function is chainable. So in any function, there are a bunch of functions like this where bind is one of them, where inside the function you can use this, and if you wrap it with the jQuery thing, this is a DOM element. And if you wrap it with the jQuery, then that jQueryfies the DOM element, and the DOM element happens to be the thing that the event happened on. So it would, in this case, be the specific table cell that you entered your mouse into. Dot background color, or CSS background color, and let's change that to green. Oh, that only did the first TD. So we'll want to take the first TD of all table rows. Oh, well. Yeah, so let's just do all table cells. This takes a while because there are a ton of organizations. 175 organizations got into Summer of Code this year. So yeah, every time you put your mouse in, it turns green. Now let's reload, and so we can chain this and bind it again to mouse out. And so we just demonstrated chaining and binding in one. And so this dot background color, again, CSS background color. Yeah, it would help if I knew jQuery myself. White. Binding to all of these. Okay, so when you first put your mouse in, it turns green. And for some reason this didn't work. Oh, first of all, it's mouse leave, and second of all, I pasted the wrong thing. So yeah, mouse leave. Okay, now it'll bind two events, which is really slow. Okay, so yeah, whenever you put your mouse over one, it turns green. In case you can't see the green, this is the green. Okay, now effects, because I really like when things look pretty. So here's how you add basic effects. So they're basically expression.function, and so there are basically 3 ways you can call these basic effects. There's this one, and then you can say a speed. For example, we have some default speeds like slow, which I think is maybe like 5 seconds, fast, which is maybe like a second or 2, or you can put your own number in milliseconds in, and speed and callback. So what callback does is callback is executed after the animation is done. So say you want like say you want nested animations, then you could do expression dot the first animation and then set a speed and do the callback. And inside the callback, do this. As I said, this is relevant, and it is relevant in this case. Dot and then do another function. So here are some of the effects. Show, you can show the element, and this expands like that. So vertically and horizontally. Hide it like that, vertically and horizontally. Toggle. This just, if it's shown, hide it. If it's hidden, show it. Slide up, doot. Slide down, doot. Slide toggle. If it's shown, hide it. If it's hidden, show it. Fade in. I can't really demonstrate that with my hands. Fade out. Ooh. Now you can't see them. Fade to. So this fade to function, this is actually really interesting. In between the speed callback and the speed parameter and the callback parameter, there's another parameter, opacity. So say you're at full opacity and you want to go to half opacity, but not all the way to 0, then you could pass in like 0.5 or something. So let me show that. This is the fun part. TD, let's do like dot mouse over. Oh yeah, so I forgot to tell you, and I forgot to put a slide for this, but see the little mouse over function. Pretty much any event you pass into bind, it also has a shortcut, which is just that function, and you just pass the callback into it. So I could do dot bind mouse over and then a callback, or I could just do dot mouse over and then callback. So I could this dot fade out. And again, it'll take a while because it has to bind to all of them. Okay, so whenever I mouse over one, it'll fade out. That's pretty fun. Yeah, and so you can use these effects to do really pretty things. All this Web 2.0 stuff. So then there are also advanced animations if you really need that little extra something. So there's basically this function, animate params duration easing callback. So the params is an object of CSS parameters you want to alter. So for example, if you want to fade the background to be yellow, then actually this is not one of the supported properties. You can, however, download a plugin for this. But say you want to make it animate to another position, then do dot params. So you could pass in like position is absolute. Oh no! First you would do dot CSS position absolute, and then you do something like params is like top is 200, left is 200, and that would just animate it to that position. Duration is how long. Again, we have our presets, and you can also pass it a number in milliseconds. Easing makes me want to drink water. Easing, I won't really go over this. This is pretty complicated, but it's just how you want to get from one place to another. So, for example, one easing is linear. Just go like that. Or rather, say this is my 0 opacity. This is my 1 opacity. Linear is just like that. There could be an easing for like an exponential curve like that or like that. Or there's one called bounce in. So that goes all the way and then bounces again and then stays. And callback, you execute this after the function is done. So the main easing that you'll use is linear. So now let me show off advanced animations. So say I want to do a dot. Let me get the first A, and I'll animate. Well, first let me set it to CSS position. And so since I don't want it to lose its current position, I'll set it top is a first, this element, dot offset, dot top, and left is, again, a first. Now, if we wanted to be really fast, we would put this a first in its own variable, and this offset in its own variable, so we only need to call these. This is the kind of thing that the jQuery core library does. So then we did the CSS. Now we'll animate to top 500. No, that's too much. 300. Left is 300. And then duration, let's make it take 4 seconds. And linear. And when we're done, we'll do a function. Yeah, so now you see it travels there, and it alerts that we are done. So let me show you. Oh, yeah, I already showed you the more basic functions. OK, so I think that now we're going to do Ajax. So most people like to be buzzword compliant, and of course that means using Ajax. So Ajax, here are some basic functions. Use .load, and so this basically takes what you have in the URL, and you can pass like any data to it, like get and post data, and this happens after you do the load. So what it does is it gets the stuff at the URL with the HTTP GET, and it sticks it in what's in here, the CSS selector. And then the callback is executed after it's done. And again, the this is relevant here. Then .post. And you see that this right there does not have a CSS selector, and that is correct. You do not get CSS to use a CSS selector here. But here in the URL, you just, here's the URL. You can post some data to the URL, and then the callback is what's executed after. And in the callback, you get a parameter, which is the data you got back. I'll demonstrate this. No, I won't demonstrate this, but I'll demonstrate its companion, the get. And this is the same thing, except it uses an HTTP get instead of post. And then there's .ajax, and this is more complicated Ajax. So let me talk about that. So what you pass into there is simply a list of options. And one of these options is the data. And this is like get or post data. Another is type, like get or post in all caps. Another is URL, which is the URL you want to get or post to. Sorry. So Ajax events. So when you're doing Ajax, you have certain events. So there are the global events. And what these are is you can use the CSS selector and bind to the global Ajax event name, and you can do a function on that. So here are a list of them. So there's Ajax start. So maybe if you had a little loading widget that pops up whenever you're loading something, you could bind the loading widget to the loading div, which is currently hidden, to the Ajax start function. And then whenever it starts an Ajax request, you can put in the callback this dot show or something. And then Ajax send when it's sending the data. Then there's Ajax success, and here's probably where you'd like to hide it. And then Ajax error. This happens when there's an error with the Ajax. So what you'd like to do here probably is like hide it and then somewhere append in an h1 tag, there was an error. So then the other type of Ajax events is local. So these are the options you can pass into Ajax, the .ajax function. So before send, this happens right before you send it. Success, this happens when the request is successful. Error, this happens when there was an error with the request. And complete, when everything is complete, regardless of whether it was successful or there was an error. So let me show off Ajax. Let's do first the .load. So table.parent.load, and I've set up a handy HTML file, data.html. And let's pass nothing into it, and let's do the callback something like And it would help if I spelled loading right. Done loading. So here's the contents of my data.html. And it loaded in, and then it alerted that it was done loading. And this actually even returns the div that was loaded. So we could do stuff on this div. Let's try that out. Table dot parent dot load data.html. That function. No, let's not pass. All of the parameters after the first and get, post, and load are optional. And I think even the data parameter is optional. So if you pass in a function where the data parameter should be, jQuery is smart enough to detect that it's a function, and it'll instead assign that to the callback and make there be no data. So then we could do like CSS background color. Let's see what's a good one. Blue. Okay, that didn't work. And I know why, because the table is gone. There, see, now it's blue. Very pretty, very hard to read too. So now let me show off some advanced Ajax. So let me just do .ajax, and I'll just say, just for starters, URL is data.html. Or even better, what we could do is we could load some JSON. How cool would that be? So we could do project. I set up this same table in JSON.json. And so we could do URL, and we could request some JSON. And we could type, will be get, and the URL. No, I already set the URL. And so then, of course, we need the success function. So for the success function, we'll say so we get the data here. So to parse the JSON, we'll just do JSON equals eval. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. This is just a quick and dirty one. So let's iterate. So I made an array of all projects. And in there I had the name. So no. So table dot parent dot append JSON I dot name, and yep, and it append. So so it got the JSON, it evaluated it, and there we go. So now it appended all the names. Now if we wanted to be extra fancy, we might want to add a line break so we could actually read it. There we go. Of course, this is from the last request. Now these are from our current request. So let me show off the global events. So let's say table.parent. And remember how append can take a jQuery object? Well, the cool thing is that I could, and remember how I said that I wouldn't get to the HTML? I actually will in the jQuery function. So div, and we can do loading. Let me show off my loading example. So we could do this dot CSS position absolute. So it's appending this, and then we'll want to hide that. So now we could do, now let's bind, let's say div text or contains Loading. Let's make sure that works. Oh well. Okay, so let's reload. Actually, let's add a class to this div. Let's add a or an ID. Div ID is loader. So now we could do like loader. Make sure that works. Now, there's the loader div. So we could do loader dot bind Ajax start function this dot show, and now whenever it starts Ajax, then it'll show it. And again, let's bind. We could chain this Ajax success. So let's just do simple Ajax URL is projects.json. And the loader div was right there, but if you saw it really quickly hide, that was because it ended the request. And the Ajax success function executed. Okay, are there any questions on this part? Yes?
How compatible is jQuery across various browsers?
Yeah, that's another thing we focus on, actually. Cross-browser compatibility. And on pretty much all modern browsers, I think, jQuery works really well. We have lots of testers to test that theory out, that it should work. Yes?
What's the order of evaluating those functions? Right? So if I have a selector and then I said .html, I said it's something, and then I said .html, and said it's something else, which does it end up?
It's left to right. So it'll first execute the selector, and then it'll do the next one, and left to right. So any other questions? Yes.
A couple slides, but can you demonstrate the .end?
Demonstrate the .end?
Yeah.
Okay. That is a very good idea that I should. So here's also where it would be useful. So let's do TD. Let's do background color. Or I keep messing this up. CSS background color green. Dot find a. Dot wait. Let's get just the first one. So we could use dot find a dot, and then we could do something to the a tag. We could do like a CSS color red and dot end. So now it's back to the original cell, and then we could do dot h. No, that wouldn't work. Dot append high. So it took it. It went from left to right. It selected it. It changed the background color to green. It got the A. It changed the color to red. Then it ended that first one, and it appended high. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it always goes to the one previous, or does it go?
Yeah, it goes to one previous. But if you nest them, so for example, if you do dot find and then dot find again, and then dot end, then it goes to the previous one. And then if you do dot end again, then it goes to the first one. And you could do something like dot find. Well, select it. Dot find something else. Dot end, which goes back to the first find. Dot find something else. Dot end, which goes back to the first find again. Dot end, which goes to the first selection. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just real quick, I assume it's true, but for event bind, like put a mouse over. Can you bind like one as many events as you want to?
Yep. The question was, can you bind as many events as you want to? And yes, you can bind as many events as you can possibly think of. I think that's it for questions. Are there any more? Okay, now on to the next section, building plugins. So if you really think jQuery should do more, this part is for you because I'm going to show you how you can make jQuery do more. So here's how you build functions, plugins. So a plugin is just basically a function. Whoops. So you extend jQuery.fn by doing jQuery.fn.myPlugin is a function. And so for those of you who are into the nitty-gritty JavaScript, jQuery.fn is basically an alias to jQuery.prototype, and then each plugin returns this. So every function returns this. The jQuery, so it wraps this in the jQuery function. So that means that what it does is essentially it returns this, which is an instance of jQuery. So it has all these other things you can do to it. Does that make sense?
Essentially, we're simply adding new functions to jQuery core object.
Yeah. You're adding new functions to the jQuery core object so that you can chain them together. And jQuery, unlike most JavaScript libraries, prototype, has one object, defines exactly one object. And it has all its stuff inside that one object. So then you can call your thing .myPlugin because that selector returns this. And this is a jQuery object, which has the myPlugin. So here's the magical helper, plugin helper, and I will demonstrate how to use that. So here's the typical plugin. Now I actually omitted something in this. So where's my little pointer thing? Oh yeah, here it is. So right here and right there, if you're looking on that screen, there should be a return. So what that does is it returns this .each, and .each also returns this. So what that does is basically it iterates through all of the items in the selection, and it does. And now this is just that one element. So now let me show it off. And for this, I will just go into my text editor. So I'm going to go into my text editor because I'll be doing multiple lines of code. So this index.php, all this code is fairly complicated. Whoops. Let me bring up the size so you can see. So another thing to note that I haven't talked about yet is when to do it. So the onload function, so what you can do is you can do document.bind ready function. So here's what you do after the DOM. This is this is when the DOM is initialized. So you really don't want to do any JavaScript out of this because it won't have any effect because the browser hasn't even parsed the HTML. So that was just a quick side note. And here you see I have a $sign and I pass a function, and that's just an alias to document.ready. So now let's do jQuery. Oh, so by the way, the $sign is an alias to the jQuery function. So if you're feeling really cross JavaScript library, if you're really want to use multiple JavaScript libraries, then instead of using the $sign, you can just use jQuery, and then jQuery, and then pass stuff into there. So, but I'm not really feeling like that today. Okay. So I'm not really feeling like that today. So I'll do this. The jQuery.fn.myPlugin is a function. Return this.each function. So this is what the typical plugin. Now we can do stuff with this here. So this dot CSS background color green. And let's go back to the HTML, the page, and reload it. And then we can do the table data, and we can do my plugin. And it takes a long time because we have a lot of them. And they're all green. And you see we returned all of these from returning this. So now we have a full plugin that's chainable and everything. So I would go into more detail about building plugins, but we were kind of constrained on the matters of time. So now advanced jQuery, if you're wondering how everything works, sorry for leaving you hanging, I'll answer that right now. So the stack. This is how the selectors and the .end function work. So this holds all the destructive operations, like the manipulation. Whenever you do one of those, it puts the previous selection in the stack, and so it's just an array. So it just pushes, does not push on the stack, and whenever you call this is actually a jQuery object, and inside the jQuery object is contained the stack. And if you go into the source code, you can see all sorts of references and utility functions for that. So the .end, what that does is it just returns the stack.pop. So it just pops the item off the stack and returns that instead of returning the current selection. Next is advanced scripting. So you can use .getScript. What this does, this is really neat. This is a function that I don't think any other JavaScript library provides, where you can get another script and it'll automatically load the other JavaScript script, and after that's done, then it'll call the callback. And .getJSON, and that'll get some JSON, so it'll automatically send all the request headers properly. Okay, and so using jQuery with other JavaScript libraries. So the way you do that is you wrap your code in this. So what this does is it has a temporary function that has the $ passed in, and there's jQuery there. And what you can do is, say you want to name your jQuery function something else, not the $, then you can actually do like JQ equals jQuery.noConflict. So what that does is it removes the $, and it just makes it to JQ. And you know what's even cooler that you can do is you can pass in jQuery.noConflict true, and then that JQ equals jQuery.noConflict true. And what that does is that totally eliminates even the jQuery object. So the jQuery object is gone, and all references to it. So what you can do then is you can have multiple versions of jQuery running on the same page. And this is useful for like speed testing and stuff. So inside there, then you can do your document ready in there, and you still have access to the $. So are there any questions? Yes?
The jQuery, the library itself, will do like unit tests to make sure all functions work?
The question is, does jQuery do unit tests? And the answer is yes. jQuery has like, I forget, like 1,500 tests written for it to test like every single function multiple times. And yeah, we've actually focused a lot on writing tests. Any other questions?
What is drop?
Okay, that's a very good question. What is drop? So for the Drupal project, we have an extension ofghop, or however you wish to pronounce that. So what that does is we just, I'm planning on starting something like this for jQuery in the future whenever I get time, and of course I'm overcommitted. So whenever I get time, I will start something like this. So drop is basically, we're extendingghop. We're taking little bite-sized tasks of things people can do, and we're just uploading them and saying, hey, you want to do this as a task, and then you get points for it. And we currently don't know what the points are for, but you get recognized in the community if you do a drop task. So yeah, if you are feeling the Drupal awesomeness and you want to try it out, then I recommend trying drop for getting your hands wet and getting people to recognize you. Any other questions? No, I think that's it. Thanks. So there's one last slide I would like to share with you, which is resources. And there's only one resource, and this resource is like the best resource ever. No, there's two resources. Well, the other I didn't put on it, and the other is Googling for jQuery. But I can assume that you all are advanced enough to be able to do that.
What's Google?
Um,
Don't answer that. We don't want anyone to know.
I wasn't trying to.
Thank you, Dmitri.
Thanks for coming and watching.